Okay, Craig. So we talked a little bit about VA loans, and we talked about when you should buy a house, when it makes sense maybe to rent and wait before buying. And we talked a little bit about home affordability. So you have a rough idea of how much you can spend. Now, when we're talking to that loan officer and it's time to decide, should I go with a conventional loan or should I go with a VA loan? What are some of the benefits of choosing a VA loan over a conventional mortgage?
Yeah, great question. And I think that covered a little bit of this earlier, but basically, conventional loans are great if you have 20% down and you have excellent credit. It's going to
Okay.
be tough to beat. VA loans, however, you don't have to put anything down in most cases. You're going to have lower closing costs in most cases because the VA limits how much lenders can actually charge. VA interest rates are well known for being less than almost any other loan program. And when you compare them to a conventional loan, they're typically going to be, in my experience, around a quarter to 3/8% less. And that can add up significantly, not just in a monthly, but interest over the life of the loan. So there's a lot of benefits there for veterans, especially when you consider no PMI and no down payment.
That sounds great. So if I have that 20% down and I decide I can go use the conventional mortgage, maybe I want to do that. But are there times when a VA loan might be better than the conventional, even if you're still putting down that 20%?
The only time that I would say that at least in my experience where I've had somebody who could have done that exact scenario is when their debt to income ratio was so high that it was already capped and they could not get a conventional loan, so they couldn't
Okay.
qualify.
Yeah.
Yeah, so VA allows for a little bit more flexibility when it comes to debt ratios, and it made sense. But other than that, it's going to be rare.
Okay. One situation, maybe a little on the outside, if you have a VA disability rating and you're not having to pay a funding fee, and we'll
Mhm.
talk more details about funding fees later, you can still put down that down payment and get that lower interest rate that many VA loans have. And that might be a situation where using the VA loan, even though you're putting that 20% down, might work out ahead of a conventional. That's a situation I had when I bought. And then the other thing is refinancing because of the EARL or
Mhm. Mhm.
uh, interest rate reduction loan.
Mhm.
Yeah, so and we'll talk about those details later.
Sure.
That allows you to refinance into another VA loan with a streamline refinance is another
Mhm.
term for it. That's a great thing you can do as well. So
Absolutely, and
yeah,
I'll also interject that a lot of people just assume it's a VA loan, you just don't put anything down. There's not really a benefit to it, but that's not the case either. And we'll get into this more when we get into funding fees. But if you put 5% down, your funding fee is reduced. If you put 10% down, your funding fee is reduced even more. So there
yeah.
are advantages that you could actually have that argument where a VA loan is still going to make more sense if you put more money down because it's going to obviously reduce the amount that you're borrowing, which is going to lower your payment and the interest that you pay, and it's going to reduce your funding fee.
Sounds great. All right, so let's talk about a little bit of the mechanics. Where do I get a VA loan? Do I just call up the VA and say, "Hey, I want to buy a house. Can you help me out?" Or do I go to a lender? How does that work?
Yeah, they'll sign you up right there on the spot.
Awesome.
No, no. So it is a common misconception. So the VA guarantees the loan, and they guarantee a portion, I should say, of the loan,
Okay.
which helps protect the lender and allows the lender to loan. But you have to go through private lenders, banks, credit unions, brokers. You have to go through them in order to get a VA loan.
Awesome. I think that's great information because I think there are some misconceptions out there. People think, oh, it's VA, they do all these things. So
Yeah.
I go to a mortgage broker. I'm sure I can find one online. I can go to a local lender. Pretty much any lender should be able to work with a VA loan. Is that correct?
Not all of them. You do
Okay.
have to find that, even if they actually can do them,
Mhm.
doesn't necessarily mean that's the one that you should work with because
Okay.
there are plenty of companies out there that specialize in VA loans more than others do. So it's important to actually do a little bit of homework and find one that they know what they're doing.
I second that recommendation. I've used a VA loan a couple times for buying homes, and I've worked with lenders that have a lot of experience with VA loans, and they were instrumental in that process.
Mhm.
They made everything go very smoothly. They really walked me through that process of getting qualified and using the letter of eligibility and all these fun things. So, highly recommend you work with a lender who knows what they're doing.